Do you want to up your tree drawings from this to this? I'm going to show you how, and all you need to do is scribble. Before we jump into the tutorial, I'd love if you'd subscribe and like. Now let's get to it. First thing I'm going to do is pick where the sunlight is coming from, which is this direction here. Next thing, it's a good thing to know what kind of tree you're drawing because the canopies and trunks on trees obviously can be quite different. So this first one I'm going to draw is a oak tree, and what I'm going to do here is just really lightly map out the canopy, keeping it really natural. Now on this outline here, key thing being my outline is slightly in from my outermost leaves, so I can just cover this up as I go and not have to worry about erasing it. So the first thing you want to do is with your lightest pencil, start filling it in with all sorts of little marks going in all directions. The good thing about this technique is you're just scribbling most of the time. Make sure to leave some of the white paper behind because those are going to act as your highlights on this tree. This technique is going to be a layering of different values of your pencil to create the highlights, midtones, and shadows on this tree canopy. So as you're making your marks, think you want to keep these about the same scale as what the leaves would be on this tree. Because essentially that's what all these little marks are supposed to be. These are leaves on the tree. Now remember our sunlight's coming from this direction, so up here I'm going to leave things a little less filled in because that's going to be kind of our highest concentration of highlights. Keep things really random. Leave all these edges a little rough and things poking out here and there. You want this to look real natural unless you're drawing like a manicured garden or something like that. I don't mind these little gaps in the tree because think not all trees are completely filled with leaves and branches. Some tree canopies have gaps in them like that. Random is good for natural. If you watch some of my other tutorials, I use the words natural and organic an annoying amount of times, but that's kind of the essence of a lot of my drawings is making sure things feel natural and organic. So just keep filling things in. Don't get stuck on anything at this point. This is going to be a layering of these shadows. So just keep things flowing. Let your pencil dance. Keep matching the scale of the leaves on the tree you're drawing with just these little marks. Even with the same value pencil here, I'm using an HB, vary up the pressure so you have some lighter and some darker shades. I know my tree trunk is going to come down something like this. We'll put a few down here. Just keep things flowing. So something like that. I'm going to move on to the next darker value, which is a 2B pencil. And now I'm just going to start filling in some darker shadows, right? Thinking again, the light's coming from this direction. So this is probably going to be some of the darker areas down here. Make sure to keep your pencil really tight in terms of not making large marks. With this technique, we're essentially drawing the highlights, midtones, and shadows of individual leaves. That's why doing it in layers like this can really make things feel natural and good, but if you start to let too many of these dots come together, things can start to just feel sort of shaded in as a whole rather than give it the texture we want. So just make sure to dab it. Sunlight is hitting a lot of this tree. And think of these are all sort of the bends and folds and shadows that are being cast from other areas of the tree. Also think every leaf probably has some shadow in it. So even up here, these leaves up here have lots more highlights on them, but also there are back sides to all these leaves. So we still want to put dots up here. So this layering is building up that texture of individual leaves without having to draw leaf by leaf, right? We're building the texture of the leaves. So up here, make sure to spread out these shadows a lot. And as you get over here, you might have more shadows, but again, be sure to lift your pencil up in between all these little marks. Down here is the lowest part of our tree canopy. There's probably a good amount of shadow down here. I think the sun has to filter through all these leaves to hit this part of the tree. When I draw trees, I like to move around a lot because that way I can sort of see the tree as a whole come together. If one part gets out of whack I can sort of adjust on the fly. But do it however you want. So if you can scribble, you can pull off this technique. It might take you a little practice. I'm actually going to go back a little bit lighter to our HB and just put some little blippities coming off. Feel like it's too much of a perfect curve on all these. I want some random leaves coming off, some random branches. I want this to feel natural and wild. Some stuff coming off down here, some coming off over here. I'm going to go back over and actually add some highlights back in. I think I got a little aggressive with my shadowy areas. Then go back over and add some of that leafy texture back in there. Okay, switching back to the 2B. Got to add some shadows to these little branches popping off. So I'm relatively happy with that canopy. I did that pretty quickly. We can refine as we go, but let's start getting into this tree trunk. We'll have the main trunk come down like this. Maybe a branch comes over like this. The other side of the trunk's on this side. Maybe a branch comes up like this on this side as well. So again, thinking of our light source, this side is going to be pretty heavily shaded, right? And underneath the tree canopy, that's going to be pretty shaded. Now this side of the canopy is probably shading in this trunk slightly, but maybe the bottom is catching some sun. So as we get down over to this area, let's leave it a little less covered, right? Get some nice lines in this bark. Now for the trunk, I'm making sure my lines go vertically up and down because the shape of the bark on the oak tree is in that direction. Down here, I'm just going to let it go a little lighter, little flare out on the bottom, maybe some grass down here. Now this side of the tree is going to be a little bit darker in this grass because that's the shadow, right? Over here, maybe it's a little lighter because the sun's able to hit it. Now I'm just finessing some of these details right as this tree is really starting to take shape. Probably add a little bit more highlights in. You want everything to be real random and natural. So I think the tree is looking pretty good. So we left those little gaps in the tree where you can see through the canopy. Let's go back now and put in some of the oak tree branches just to add another layer of realism. So just a few finishing touches as we go here. Add in any more shadows you might need. Add any highlights back in you might need. Adding a few little wild branches here and there I think is a nice touch. Okay, so there's the oak tree for you. Now let's draw a couple other trees using this same technique. For this next tree, let's draw an aspen tree that's getting hit with some wind from the side. So we'll have the sun coming in the same direction here. So again, starting off with our lightest shade here. But let's say the wind is coming from this direction. So you can see the big difference here is all my lines are going to the right. We'll have our tree trunk down here. So this is going to mostly be in the shadow from the tree itself. Have the little flare out on the trunk down here. Now let's try a fir tree using the same technique. So fir trees often have branches that kind of go like this, and then the under part where the needles come off are often like this, right? So that's kind of the main shape of each branch. So again, with my lighter value pencil here, we're just going to mimic that shape as we come down. As you go down a fir tree, the branches often extend longer. A lot of times people just get stuck drawing the branches left to right. Remember, there are also branches right in the center of the tree coming towards you. There are also branches in the background going in the opposite direction from you. But it's just the same technique. Leave some white behind on the paper. And I'm just working an HB pencil at this point, mostly with the same pressure, but leaving those little gaps on the paper for your highlights. Up here, the needles are normally pretty thick on a fir tree, so kind of go in all directions. With the branches going like this, and here are the pine needles coming off, right? Most of your shadows are going to be in this under part of the branch. So don't put too much shadow up on the branch itself. Put it down here in the needles, because that's where most of those shadows come in. Remember, most likely it's probably a little darker on this left side. Okay, so let's tackle the trunk here. I'm going with the 2B pencil. So up here, there's not going to be much to do. Just putting little dabs. So make sure all your lines are traveling vertically. I'm also picking my pencil up as I go through here because I want some of these branches to appear as if it's on that trunk. So the right side I'm leaving a little bit lighter because, again, sunlight. So with the trunk in now, let's add a few more branches to this just to fill it out a little bit more. Up against the trunk of the tree is where things are always going to be a little bit darker. So make sure to carry that throughout all your branches. You know, that's where all the branches come together, so naturally it's going to be a little bit darker up against the trunk. Something like that. So if you're just starting to draw trees, building the texture this way and layering your different values of pencil gives you a real natural and organic looking tree that doesn't have a drawn-on feeling. Remember just to always be thinking about where your light source is coming from and what shadows would be cast because of that, where your highlights would be, and just keep things natural and loose. Now, if you're looking to draw a whole forest of trees, be sure to check out my How to Draw a Forest tutorial. Please subscribe and like if you enjoyed this tutorial, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching, everybody.